Welcome back, my lords, ladies, and lieges, to another installment of Zodiac Reads, the series where Zodiac finds things he wants to read on the internet, and then, well, he reads them for you. Today, I bring you the final installment of the Red Hot Owl series from the subreddit r/rpghorrorstories. While you don't need to watch the previous installments to understand this story, I would highly recommend it. The previous stories do add just a little bit of extra context for all of this, plus they're very fun, and by watching them you do get to support me, so consider checking them out before watching this video. Regardless if you have or have not, let's get right into the story. Unlike the previous two installments, this story is not rated not safe for work, and I don't believe it needs any sort of content warning. So, without further ado, let's begin. Player wants to play as the literal spawn of Satan, is surprised when rejected, by user Red Hot Owl. Okay, I will try to keep this shorter than usual. So, my friend's DMing a custom setting that we designed together. You can read my previous story for a more detailed description, if interested, but I will quickly summarize the relevant parts here. Basically, it's a dark fantasy world where the players control a squad of artificially created, half-monster hybrids, specifically designed by humans for combating other monsters. So, for example, the most commonly utilized hybrids are creatures known as defanged, which are essentially artificially created vampires that exclusively crave the blood of other vampiric entities. Once, if ever, their purpose is fulfilled, they will wither away and die out as well. Pretty much every hybrid has some sort of fail-safe in their design that ensures their compliance. Think DC's Suicide Squad and add a grimdark aesthetic to it. My friend is still going to be referred to by his full former World of Warcraft username, loverboyxxx, which I refuse to abbreviate, because forcing people to read the whole thing out is hilarious to me. I am a fully functioning adult, I swear. Recently, loverboyxxx wanted to expand and diversify his player roster, since most of his current players, with the exception of one, are playing defanged characters. That's not necessarily a bad thing, since they all play them well, but it is a shame, considering the amount of effort put into the world. Personally, I think that he's just feeling guilty that he made me come up with all of these races and functions that nobody ended up playing. But, you know, that's just a hunch. So, he decided to put up an ad on Discord, stating what he was looking for. For context, it is a large server that hosts a variety of TTRPG games with their own dedicated channels. His only requirements were for any potential player to familiarize themselves with the basics of the lore and to choose a species that isn't a defanged. Straightforward enough, right? At least, most of the other candidates thought so. That is, with the exception of one, who we will call Suckula. Suckula was one of the last people to respond to the ad, by which point loverboyxxx had already filled the desired slot in his party. However, Suckula was particularly enthusiastic, emphasizing that they were a big fan of classic horror and that they had been looking for a setting like this one for a while. Being the stern yet merciful god that he is, loverboyxxx let them know that he could free up an extra slot, and ask them to submit their character's backstory for review so he could figure out how to integrate them into the current plot. Also, yes, he once again made it abundantly clear that he was no longer accepting vampire characters. Other than that, all playable, emphasis on playable, species and classes were fine. 2 days go by since their last interaction and no word from Suckula. Loverboyxxx figured that they were either busy or really committed to writing out a detailed backstory. The group were taking a break that weekend, so he had no reason to rush them. On the following Monday, just before heading to bed, he was messaged by Suckula, who provided a Google Docs link for their newly created character. Upon opening said link, our unfortunate protagonist was greeted by walls upon walls of solid text. The glow of the screen illuminated his weary and unreasonably handsome face. His eyes stung from the bright red letters inscribed upon a black background, using a suitably edgy font. Every fiber of his being was telling him to stop, to look away before it's too late, and yet his morbid curiosity got the better of him, and so, against his better judgment, he read on. Now, I don't think that it would be right for me to copy-paste this entirety of this person's sheet, so I will just recount what I think are the most noteworthy parts. For one, I'm not sure whether they even read any of the lore. We have a basic list of bullet points that is only like 1,000 characters long. That's only half of Discord's character limit per post. Suckula outright stated that they were a fully fledged vampire, not even the world's version of it, just a classical, sleeps in a coffin and hangs from the rafters kind of vampire. Red eyes and long cape included. I'm not throwing shade at the stereotypical archetype, it's just not what we were going for. Second, instead of choosing a class, they went ahead and made up one of their own. Well, okay, they technically chose a rogue as their profession, but they also added that they were capable of enhancing their attacks with vampiric magic. To answer your question, no, we didn't have anything called vampiric magic in our setting. Hell, even the quintessential D&D style blood magic wasn't fully introduced yet. They were able to turn into a bat and a wolf at will because, of course they were, and my personal favorite, they were able to make our other characters into their personal thralls. Overpowered? Unreasonable? Yes. But not entirely unsalvageable so far. After all, loverboyxxx usually tweaks his class system a bit to accommodate players, and, while the fact that this person clearly hadn't bothered to read any of the rules was annoying, perhaps Suckula could have played some sort of deluded, theatrical antagonist, thinking himself as an incarnation of Dracula himself, the legend of whom does canonically exist in the world. Well, all such inclinations were dashed as soon as loverboyxxx got to the backstory. See, Suckula's character wasn't born, conventionally speaking. Oh no, that would be too predictable, too tame. Instead, they were actually among the first vampires to ever exist, formed from the sizzling blood pools of hell itself. You can probably already guess who their father is supposed to be. You've read the title. When loverboyxxx told me about this, my first thought was that this person had to be taking the piss. But then I got to read it and, well, while I can't be 100% certain they weren't just trolling, it was written in such a genuine way that I can't help but think that they were being for real. They even disputed their decline, saying that it made sense for a character like theirs to exist. Gotta love it when people lecture you and try to educate you about your own setting. But of course, loverboyxxx was the one being unreasonable for not letting them play their bootleg Castlevania reject. Besides, they were actually doing us a favor by contributing to the established and, in their opinion, mundane lore. Internal logic be damned, it's all about that power fantasy, baby. Needless to say, they left soon after throwing their little tantrum. It's not really a horror experience as much as I just found it ridiculous and wanted to share it. Sure, Suckula was sort of being an ass at the end, and their entitlement and expectations were less than reasonable, but they weren't some comically awful cartoon villain either. TLDR, player submits an edgy Mary Sue character for approval and is surprised when it gets rejected, doesn't even get to session 0. Yes, this was a shorter story, and yes, it wasn't really a horror story, as they said, but I will say, my god, do I relate to the pain of people not being able to fucking read. My god. Even outside of the tabletop RPG sphere, like, I've just, existing online has been a constant reminder that people just always assume nobody reads. Always just assume no one actually read anything that you put out on the internet before they contact you about things, like, for real. I will say I do appreciate good old loverboyxxx for it sounds like he was much more understanding. He didn't sound like the kind of person that just like sees someone's like, you know, just very cliche, edgy OC and just like cringes and says like, ew, gross. Like what it genuinely sounded like he wanted to work with the player and make it work within the setting and like not just immediately toss them to the flames, so to speak, you know. And honestly, I love that idea that was that he came up with, the idea of like them being some deluded like theatrical like person who's just like, oh, I'm a vampire, but they're like actually not, or anything like that. Like, would have been super cool, and I'm sad that they were not interested in that. But it is, to me, I think it definitely was a problem of like, you know, the character itself, oh well, it can be fixed, it can be worked with. You know, if somebody could listen. I definitely think the flaw of Suckula was the fact that when rejected or told that this wouldn't work, they wanted to throw a tantrum about it. You know, I wish they would have maybe worked with the DM more and modified their character to work with it. I think it could have been very fun. But you know, c'est la vie. Just perhaps not the game for them, and hopefully in the future they learn to read the information given to them before they join a campaign. But with that being said, please leave a comment and a like if you enjoyed, subscribe for more content, and I will see you in the next video, my lords, ladies, and lieges. Zodiac, out.